Okay, folks, welcome to the Kalihi Complete Streets meeting. We're all here and very excited that you have joined us this evening. Let's go ahead and get it all kicked off.
Aloha Kalihi. So I'm John Nouchi. I'm the Deputy Director of the City and County of Honolulu's Department of Transportation Services. And I couldn't be happier to be here tonight to introduce your DTS team as they present to you plans to bring better and safer complete streets to our Kalihi. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge our Department Director, Roger Morton, will be joining us. And I do see that Councilmember Radiant Cordero is in the meeting also, and a very loud shout out to her for just being a champion of complete streets and equity across modes, not only for her Kalihi, but for our island as a whole. Personally, I have a lot of love for Kalihi. I have lots of family and friends that live in Kalihi, but I also worked for over 15 years at the bus facility down on Middle Street. And also my halau has a lot of deep roots in Kalihi. Also, so when I think about it, a lot of the good things in my life happen in Kalihi, and I think a lot of the best food and even the best eats are in Kalihi too. And I know that those who live here in Kalihi are fiercely proud of Kalihi's hardworking people and their industriousness. And even if you look at the amount of pride that the Farrington Govs have, it's kind of a force of its own. But sometimes Kalihi can feel like the rest of the island has forgotten about them sometimes. And I know those feelings. And a friend of mine composed a mele about Kalihi that starts with the words, Mai ue Kalihi e kui luna, maluna o keao e ha'aheo. So what that means is, don't you cry, Kalihi, stand up under the skies of our heavens, be proud. And, I think that's really a good way to start this meeting because, through these complete streets that we'd like to implement here in Kalihi for everyone, it's time for Kalihi to be proud as a neighborhood where people live, work, and play. And DTS is really happy to be here tonight to detail some of the projects which will bring better mobility to Kalihi for all that walk, bike, bus, drive, and live, work, and play. So I'd like to turn it over to our DTS staff to get our meeting rolling tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Nochi. Thanks for getting us started with those thoughts. I think we all share the fond appreciation for Kalihi, particularly as a place to eat and shop personally. But as we walk the streets of Kalihi today, you can see that there are so many people walking, biking, taking transit, but that was not necessarily the way that the streets of Kalihi were designed to be used. So very excited to have this opportunity to talk about ways that we can implement some safety changes and provide some of the benefits that this community has been asking for so long. So next slide just provides an overview of sort of why we've asked you guys here this evening. We're going to be talking about some of the major corridors in Kalihi and ways that we can apply complete streets to those corridors. So we'll be talking about North King Street, Waikimilo Hoftailing, as well as School and Middle Streets. And we have lots of ideas to share, and we certainly need feedback from you all to guide the designs and help us figure out ways to move forward. We have been asked for many years to look at some of these things, and so it has taken us this much time to really detail these different kinds of improvements. And tonight we're going to talk a bit about the trade-offs that have to be made for any of these changes to take place, right? Street right-of-way is like any resource that is limited. It is precious, and there are different people that sort of vie for that different space. So we're looking to you folks tonight to help us make some of those decisions about how to divide up the street space in Kalihi. So let's do some introductions before we go any further. So there are a number of folks here tonight who have the same background as John and I, who are with the project team. There are folks from the city and county. I personally am our Complete Streets Administrator. Daniel Alexander is going to do some introductory remarks as well, and he's the project manager. And then we have a number of other staff from our traffic engineering group, I think in particular, that are going to help us move some of the projects forward. We are very lucky to have some fantastic consultants helping with this effort as well. You're going to hear from Drew and Mike with Nelson Nygaard. They are based on the continent and bring best practices to this project, and we're very happy to have their expertise. PBR Hawaii, Teresa and Katie are with us this evening, as well as some other staff, and they help us with our outreach activities. We have been doing a lot of outreach for this project. It's all of our big projects, and we thank them for that, and so you'll see them. And then we are also supported by ATA in terms of traffic engineering, data collection, and they're a very well-respected local traffic engineering firm. So keep an eye out for someone with this background from one of these facets of our team if you have any questions or comments. At this point, let me turn it over to Teresa, who will do a quick overview of some of the kind of rules of the meeting and some etiquette, just to walk people through how to do our Zoom meeting this evening. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So before we get started, we want to go over a few technology know-hows so that everyone feels comfortable participating tonight. Please note that this meeting, including the breakout rooms, will be recorded. Participants, all of you, have the opportunity to chat or discuss later on in the breakout sessions. So even though you don't have an opportunity to speak right now, you will have that opportunity later on in the meeting tonight. So you will be muted for the duration of the presentation. So please note that if you have any comments or questions, enter it into the chat box, and then we'll go ahead and respond to you that way. Next slide, please. So during the breakout sessions, if you are interested in speaking with us, you can use the raise hand feature, and then we'll call upon you to go ahead and say what you would like to say. So for those of you that are on your computer, if you want to raise your hand, you go to the bottom of your screen and click on the participants icon. And then once you click on the participants icon, you should be able to click on the raise hand feature. Once you click on the raise hand feature, we'll be able to call on you, and then you can put your hand back down. For those of you that are on your phone app, at the bottom of your screen, you should see 3 dots with a more underneath. Click on that or tap on that, and then the chat box will pop up with a raise hand, and then you can just go ahead and click the raise hand. For those of you that have called in tonight, on your dial pad, you can click *9 to raise your hand. And then once you want to lower your hand again, you can click *9 again. So throughout this meeting, there will be several opportunities to participate in polling. When we are at the section where we will provide polling opportunities, a pop-up will show up on your screen. All you need to do is choose your answer response and then click submit. Once everyone has responded, then we'll go ahead and show everyone the results. So with that being said, we have our first practice poll that we would like to present to you guys. And this is just to get you guys warmed up, make sure that everyone feels comfortable participating and knows how to do it. So you should see on your screen that the poll has popped up. If you're on your computer or your phone app, go ahead and select your choice to the following question. How would you like to get around Kalihi? We have A, walk, B, bike, C, the bus or handy van, D, roll in a scooter, wheelchair, or other means, E, drive, F, skateboard, or G, some other way. It looks like people are already responding, which is great. If you have any issues, questions, or comments, go ahead and enter it into the chat box at the bottom right hand of your screen. We'll wait a few more seconds if a few more people want to participate. And then I will end the poll and you'll be able to see the results. Okay, it looks like everyone has participated. Here you should see the results of the poll. It looks like the vast majority of, well, nope, almost equal E, drive and B, bike. It looks like 33% prefers to drive, while 30% prefers to bike. Great. Thank you so much, guys. So there will be several opportunities for everyone to participate in the polling questions. And I think we are good to go. So the next section will be
So I'll take it back.
DTS.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so this is the agenda for this evening's meeting. We're going to do a very quick refresher on what Complete Streets is, because that's a term that obviously we use a lot, very important to our program, and so we want you guys to understand that. And then we're going to give an overview of some of the traffic safety tools that you're going to see proposed for these various corridors. So we're going to talk about them first, sort of generally, and the benefits, and then you will see those tools appear on the plans. Our team, Mike and Drew, are going to walk through the proposed designs for the corridors that we're looking at. And then hopefully we can be efficient with time and have 2 breakout groups. And so we're asking folks to pick 2 of the 3 corridors they're most interested in. We will certainly put the presentation and the plans online by tomorrow in case people want to talk about all 3 and don't get a chance this evening. But we're going to try and rush through that, and then we'll talk about next steps and wrap up at the end. So the objectives for tonight basically are to share with you what we heard from the community and the data that we've collected through this process, describe the improvements that we have drafted for community consideration, and get feedback from you guys. So pretty straightforward, but a really important part of the process. So for those of you who maybe are a little less familiar with Complete Streets, let me just do a couple quick reminders. So Complete Streets is a city law that was adopted in 2012 that basically says that our streets should be safe and comfortable for everyone who chooses to use them, right? So people are trying to get around Oahu in all kinds of ways, right? Driving, walking, taking the bus, but we've traditionally, conventionally, really only focused on moving vehicles as simply as possible and as quickly as possible. And sometimes we have a little sidewalk on the side, right, for people who want to walk. So this law was basically a charge to us at the city to say, we want to prioritize some of those other roadway users that have been traditionally left out. And they typically include pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders. So that's sort of the lens at which we come to this project. So the next slide shows sort of a generic urban street, right? And shows all the different functions that a street actually can serve. It does not have to be just a thoroughfare for vehicles. Of course, that's a really important job of our streets, but they're also used for loading, for businesses, for bicycles, for transit service. I think some of you are probably familiar with the new bus-only lane that we did in downtown Honolulu, right? And you can kind of see actually an example of that here. There are folks in wheelchairs and strollers and all kinds of wheeled things that have a hard time sometimes getting around on our street, but they're an important design consideration. Obviously, trees and the urban ecosystem are also important considerations. Sometimes that we don't necessarily notice on the streets of Kalihi today. And then of course there are businesses there and there is social life going on, economic exchanges, as well as social exchanges between neighbors, right? So this is sort of an idealized image of a complete street, but they should look different in every neighborhood. And so that's what we're here tonight to show you what we think complete streets in Kalihi should look like and get your feedback. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our project manager, Daniel Alexander. Daniel came to us several years ago from the Hawaii Bicycling League. He has a long history of working in these kinds of projects, and we're really lucky to have him. So Daniel, why don't you give us a little introduction to the Kalihi project in particular?
Hello, everyone. Renee, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm going to share some about what we've learned and what we've heard from the Kalihi community, what we found in the data. One thing that I think is clear to anyone in Kalihi is that people are getting around through all sorts of means, and walking is a really important piece. The bus is certainly an important piece, bicycling as well as driving, and we need to be safely accommodating all these modes. Next slide.
Sorry. We'll get there.
Technical issue. All right, so the Kalihi Complete Streets project, it covers kind of the greater Kalihi, both the Kalihi neighborhood and some areas that stretch all the way into Nu'uanu, covers Oliha, and we're looking at three major corridors, and that's Middle Street and School Street, and that goes all the way from from the far end of Kalihi all the way to Nu'uanu. And then North King Street, stretching basically from Middle Street to Dillingham, and Waikimilo and Hoftailing between Nimitz and School Street. And so three really important corridors that we're going to be talking about today, and we're looking at improvements too. Next slide, please. So where are we at in this project? We kicked it off in 2019. I'm going to tell you more about what we heard, but we're at the point where we're bringing these final draft plans to you, and we want to hear, did we get it right? Are we in the right direction? Are we ready to call these final and move forward with them? So that's the stage that we're at now. And you might ask, why did we pick these corridors? So complete streets. We're looking to do it on all of our corridors, but particularly those where we have safety issues. So here, this is from our Oahu pedestrian plan, and the red lines there are high pedestrian injury corridors. And the little dots, the red and the orange dots, they're high pedestrian intersections. And as you see, our corridors are brightly lit on this map, which means that we have significant pedestrian safety issues that we need to address. Next slide, please. So one of the major factors is speeding. So this slide highlights some of the speeding issues, as well as it's a heat map showing where there's not only pedestrian, but bicycle and motor vehicle collisions. And you see our corridors there. Again, that we can do better on these corridors, and we need to. Next slide, please. And so we're going to talk about some of the future improvements and really get your feedback on them later. But I want to highlight one that is imminently happening. And this is a site where we knew there were pedestrian safety issues. And it's North King and Richard Lane. And we went out and we put in a pedestrian refuge island, which is the photo there on the left. And we're going to be upgrading that, making it concrete, so where it's a more substantial island. And we're also going to be installing a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is shown there on the right. And this is a device that a pedestrian pushes when they're going to cross, and it flashes to help get the driver's awareness. This is going to be going in the near term, in the next year or two. And we're going to look at this on a number of other crossings where we want to improve safety. So this is just one of the things we're going to move on the earliest, and really wanted to highlight both the importance of safety here, but some of the measures that we're taking. Next slide, please. So one thing we know about the Kalihi community is, like I said, people are getting around through all sorts of means. We see versus the island as a whole, more people walking, bicycling, and taking transit. Next slide, please. And it's rather diverse within the Kalihi community. If you break it down by area and you look at areas where the more Makai sections of Kalihi, those areas Makai of School Street, you have even higher rates of people walking, bicycling, and taking transit. And this kind of just shows you the numbers in certain census tracts as high as a quarter of people, 1 in 4 people getting around by walking and biking, and as high as 40%, so 4 out of 10 people getting around by bus. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, 2019, that was when we kicked off this project. And we went out and that was a really discovery phase of hearing from the community what they cared about, what their values were that they wanted to see transform the streets and invested in the streets. And we did that with a community meeting, just like this. And it was more open though. We were at the point where we were wanting to hear exactly what everyone wanted so we could make sure to address those in the plans. And what we're doing is coming back to you today is saying, well, we heard you and we collected all the data and this is what we came up with. We used a lot of different tools like going out to the community events and web mapping. We did stakeholder meetings and just highlight our community advisory committee. We had some really great leaders from the community, representatives of the schools, including Farrington High School, Kamehameha schools, and business leaders, including the Kalihi Business Association, community groups like Kalihi Valley, and other community leaders, representatives from neighborhood boards and whatnot. And they've really helped shape our plan as we've developed and developed these designs. So next slide, please. And these are some of the things that we heard. So first and foremost, pedestrian safety, specifically as it relates to our elderly and our youth. And as some of you might be aware, Honolulu has the dubious distinction of often having one of the highest elderly pedestrian safety issues of any city in the US. And that's something we really need to do better on. And it's something we heard from the community as loud and clear as being an issue. We also heard the desire for better bike facilities to connect Kalihi with the downtown and surrounding neighborhoods. We heard the desire for a more enjoyable pedestrian environment with more street trees to make it more shaded and cooler and more enjoyable to walk. We heard the desire for safe connections between the neighborhoods and between Kalihi and downtown particularly. And then also Makai to get people down to the rail system, but also get people down to the jobs and commercial areas that are more Makai. And certainly we heard the desire to make sure we're supporting the local businesses, and they really are the core of the Kalihi business community, and just making sure that we're maintaining access and doing stuff that's going to support them. And then finally, that we're continuing to make sure emergency access and our EMS and police and whatnot can all respond to the issues out there. Next slide, please. So these are some of the themes that we carried forward and we really tried to instill in the proposals that we're going to show you all tonight. First and foremost, improve walking, improve pedestrian safety, and improve the transit experience and connections to transit, improve bicycling facilities and bicycle safety, safe connections, Makai, and between downtown and Kalihi and surrounding neighborhoods, and the support for businesses. So next slide. And with that, I am going to hand it off to one of our consultant experts. Drew Van Hengel is going to take it over here to tell you about some of the Complete Streets tools that we're looking to put into use here. So thank you.
Hello, Daniel. My name is Drew. In the section that I'm speaking through, we'll introduce the toolbox of Complete Streets elements that result in safer and slower streets. The first set, starting the next slide, is pedestrian improvements. And there's a variety of improvements that can be installed as pilots, such as this painted curb extension to permanent that are constructed with curb. The pedestrian improvements include crossing enhancements to get across the street, improvements to sidewalks and walkways, such as new sidewalk, lighting, trees, and vegetation, and transit stop improvements that make it safer to transfer and get to stops, and also dignifies the experience of waiting for the bus. The next few slides are focused on enhanced crossings. Enhanced crossings are helpful safety measures on roads with higher volumes and speeds. Treatments can include raised or painted medians with room for pedestrians to take refuge as they cross the roadway. In this picture, you can see that the pedestrians can focus on crossing one half of the street at a time, rather than waiting for a gap in traffic from both directions. This is the first of several tools that we'll use to help us preserve crossings. The data show that marked crosswalks at unsignalized crossings on busy wide streets like North King aren't safe enough. And that if we want to maintain that pedestrian access and those marked crosswalks, we need to enhance them with these islands or these rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or reduce the number of lanes to cross to reduce people's exposure to moving traffic. This slide shows the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which will soon be at Richard Lane. There's already one here on Kamehameha Street between Ka'ako and Ala Moana. We're focusing today on street crossing improvements, like I said, but there are other elements of Complete Streets that we will also be addressing. Another element to improve that is a part of our package are raised crossings. This is another way to enhance marked crossings. These crossings slow traffic by using a speed hump profile or design with a flat crossing across the top for people to walk across. On the next slide, another design element to enhance crossings is curb extensions. These make pedestrians waiting to cross the street more visible, and by having them extended into the side triangle where drivers on the approach can see them more clearly, and shorten the crossing distance and time that people are exposed to potential through traffic on the street. In terms of the physical design of the curb extensions, we always aim for raised concrete as shown in this foreground, but due to drainage or other feasibility issues, we may consider other options with modular curbs or delineators as shown in the background on this photo and on an earlier slide. I'd like to point out that one of the other major pedestrian safety benefits of curb extensions are that they tighten the radius and require motorists to take the turn at slower speeds, which means that they are more likely to see and stop for a pedestrian who's waiting to cross the street. This curb extension in Mo'ili'ili is a bit more durable than the ones with the flex posts, which were on our first slide, because of the asphalt curb, which is placed along the edge. It's a simple and cost-effective way to achieve the slowing benefit and design in gaps for the people walking across the crosswalk. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight that throughout the presentation of the designs, you'll see this icon related to transit. We've been working with the bus to ensure the pedestrian crossings that are maintained in this project are appropriately aligned with transit stops, both existing and future ones. And we do this to support people getting both to and from high ridership stops. Protected bike lanes, like this one on Ward Avenue, provide greater comfort. So now I'm moving into the elements focused on how to make street and safety designs that are focused for people riding bicycles. This protected bike lanes provide greater comfort to bicyclists than riding in the vehicle lanes by separating people from moving traffic. This separation can be delineated by using a raised median, flexible delineator posts or bollards, or on-street parking. When on-street parking is used to create a protected bike lane, the parked cars offer opportunities to eliminate the conflicts between buses, transit users, and people on bikes. Where there's not space available for this protection or this horizontal separation from motor vehicle lanes, standard bike lanes can be installed. These will and can also contain green paint at locations where there are conflicts with vehicles like intersections and driveways. Another tool that's in our toolbox for the overall complete streets improvements that you'll see today is road diets like this one on Kamehameha 4 Road. Road diets serve the same number of cars despite removing 2 through lanes, and they use the extra space between the curbs to add a center turn lane and bike lanes. And road diets have many benefits. They provide a designated space for people to bicycle. They reduce the number of lanes that people have to cross while walking. They reduce rear end collisions resulting from people hitting drivers who are waiting to turn left when there is no dedicated turn pocket, and they slow speeds. Importantly, when we think about improving bicycle facilities, we think about new bikeways not only because they provide this designated place for people to ride their bicycles on the road, but we also tried to design them in a way that they feel safe and comfortable enough to leave the sidewalks for the people who are walking. The goal of improving bike safety and infrastructure here came not only from the CAC meetings, but the community workshops, the Oahu Bike Plan, and support from council members past and present. The next few slides will illustrate some of the positive benefits of planning for people riding bicycles. We know the positive impacts of unprotected bike lanes and road diets from national studies, but we also know that there are local benefits. The South King Street corridor, where the 2-way protected bike lanes are located, has seen a 50% reduction in pedestrian injuries since the protected bike lane was installed. And across the country, we see not only these pedestrian safety benefits, but overall crash reduction benefits for people driving, for people walking, and people bicycling. Bicycling contributes to local economies as well. Home values rise when bike lanes and paths are installed nearby. Not only does bicycle access contribute to the local economy because people on bikes spend more time at local retail, spend more on local retail over time, making more visits to shops and spending more over time. But bike projects also save money because they cost less than auto infrastructure projects. We'll go to the next slide, thank you. And so to reiterate the benefits of complete streets improvements, supporting small businesses, the other benefits at the lower cost of transportation options retain employees. In other words, there's less money out of employees' pockets to care for and maintain their vehicles. And they support local access for people who are dependent upon walking, biking, and transit. So this last section, that's my responsibility, is to talk about some of the ways in which we try to find the space for these new safety and modal improvements, like new medians and protected bike lanes. There are really about 4 ways to do this, and we use a combination of all the ways to come up with the suggestions we are discussing tonight. The ways are to widen the road, to remove or repurpose car or bus travel lanes, to narrow vehicle travel lanes or to use available excess space, and to reconsider the allocation of on-street parking. Widening the roads is a challenge in these project areas because the community is built out already. In a built out realm like North King Street and Kalihi, the parcels front the sidewalk, which are used heavily. And so there's not space to look for, there's not space to include complete streets elements using this strategy of widening the road. On Kamehameha 4 Road, you may be familiar with that project, which was a road diet. That worked because there was very little traffic, and North King Street, School Street, and parts of Waikami-Lohaftilling carry a lot more vehicles, including business and school traffic and high frequency transit that requires reliable travel times. With the exception of some limited locations, we couldn't repurpose travel lanes because transit service is a driving decision point on all travel lane reductions. Buses carry more people than personal automobiles. Buses who carry more people than personal automobiles would also be stuck in traffic, leaving more people stuck in traffic. The third way that we look for space to include the complete streets elements are to reduce vehicle travel lane widths. Reducing lane widths from in order to find the space for protected bike lanes, we need to find between 10 and 12 feet. That's a lot of space. And a median needs about 6 feet of extra spaces. And the lane widths on North King Street are mostly already minimized at 10 to 11 feet for travel lanes, 10 feet for passenger car lanes, and 11 feet to accommodate the bus. In this sample location near Kalihi Street, we would only be able to gain 3 feet of space by narrowing the roadway, which isn't even enough for a median island, which requires 6 feet for a safe and comfortable waiting area between the 2 directions of traffic. And finally, the fourth option is to look at on-street parking within the public right-of-way and to consider how the curb lane can best serve people and businesses. Parking supply that is underutilized means that the parking supply is too large. Parking supply that is overutilized, meaning that it's more than 85% full, means that sometimes people looking for parking can't find it. However, we also have to consider whether the use is appropriate. Parking that is 85% full of the same people parking all day limits the access to other patrons and would benefit from exploring parking management and pricing strategies that give it the appropriate turnover to serve customers. The city needs to use its limited right-of-way, this precious resource, as Renee described, to provide safe mobility for people, especially where businesses have off-street parking. The design strategies we are going to share with you today do propose repurposing a lot of on-street parking for safety, business access, and through travel that supports both people walking and biking. But they first look at the other methods or use a combination of all 4 of the methods that I described in this section. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mike to start describing the design strategies for the corridors in Kalihi.
Thanks, Drew. Aloha, everyone. I'm Mike, an engineer on the consultant team, and so I'll be going through each of our study corridors at a high level, and then we'll be conducting a few polls to get feedback on the proposed designs. And afterwards, everyone will have the opportunity, as we said at the beginning of the meeting, to go into these breakout rooms. You can pick a corridor, and then we'll be able to look at the design in more detail and discuss feedback in a smaller group setting. So first, we're starting with North King Street. So this is a key corridor in the Kalihi neighborhood. It currently serves lots of different modes: through traffic, transit, parking, and walking through its design. And so we wanted to explore the opportunity to make bikeway connections as defined in the City and County Bike Plan. And so North King Street, this is the City and County Bike Plan map that you see right here. North King Street's highlighted in yellow on the map, and all the dashed lines represent various types of proposed bike facilities, and solid lines are facilities that are already in place. So you see a lot of proposed facilities, some already in place. And so looking at how to make those east-west connections to existing and planned bike routes for people of all ages and abilities, King Street made the most sense. It was the most logical because it connected, it will allow us to connect most Makai routes. And then other parallel corridors just aren't good fits. Nimitz is mostly used for freight. It's a big, wide, fast road. Dillingham has future rail, and so there's very limited space on that street. And then there's also School Street, which is further Malka. It's also one of our study corridors. We're not going to be proposing a bikeway at this time on that corridor due to space constraints and the competing transit modes, and we'll go over that corridor in a little bit. And so what you see here is a map of the proposed corridor improvements for North King Street. You see on the map, there's two main themes. First, there's colored icons, and these represent complete street safety improvements at intersections. So we'll talk about a bunch of locations as we go through this, and then in detail in the breakout rooms if you're interested in joining. I'll be hosting the King Street breakout room, so we're happy to go through it with you. Secondly, the bikeway, and so those are the colored lines on the map. So different colored lines represent different types of the bikeway that's proposed. These range from a standard striped bike lane to protected bike lanes with buffers and flexible posts. For some small segments where the space is constrained, you can see yellow lines on this map. The bike lane would be proposed to be dropped and shared lane markings added to the vehicle lane. So people riding would have to share with people driving in that lane, just due to the space constraints. And so we're going to go through the corridor briefly and look at a few key locations so we can get some on-street views of what would be proposed on North King Street. So we're going to start at the Red Star. This is at Gulick Street on the Eva side of our study corridor. And so we're proposing several elements that we'd like to share with you. And so this is an existing view. We're looking Diamond Head. You can see Ray's Cafe on the right. And now we're just going to go through and transform the street and show what it would look like with the proposed elements. And so you can see by doing some lane realignments and keeping the same number of lanes, which is 4, we're able to fit in a standard bike lane on the left side of the street. You can see with the dashed green markings, and then a parking buffered bike lane on the right side of the street. So this bike lane would be at the curbside and the parking would be preserved along this block. And then in the background, there's a pedestrian refuge island that we would recommend improving further with full concrete. So these are all common themes that you'll see throughout the corridor. We just wanted to showcase this location right here to start. So I think we can move on to the next one. And so here we are, and we're going to look at the stretch of roadway near Farrington High between Kalihi and Waikimilo. So we're about midway through the corridor. And so here's a view. We're also looking Diamond Head. Farrington High is on the left, and Haka Street is the light in front of us. That's the entrance to the housing development, which you can see on the right. Right now, there's 3 lanes going Eva and 2 lanes going Diamond Head. And so the team's proposing here to install a protected bike lane on both sides of the street. So to fit this in, the 3rd Eva lane that runs along Farrington High would be converted to the bike lane. So you just saw that transform. Oh, we can go back, yeah. And so we've done analysis on this segment, and it showed minimal impacts with this change. Most of the corridor is 4 lanes, so there's just this 1 or 2 blocks in this location where there are 3 lanes Eva. And so that would just be matching the existing configuration along the rest of the corridor of 2 lanes. On the right side of the roadway, the Makai side, the parking would be removed. So we'll talk a little bit more about parking later on. But this area has low midday occupancy and it has pretty low turnover. So we found that people are using it to store their vehicles for extended periods. And so following with the themes we discussed earlier that Drew talked about, this is in line with thinking about repurposing parking for more people to use the street and to create safer streets. You can also see the bus stop here just on the right where the child is riding. And so the bus stop would still remain, and then people biking would share this space if the bus was stopped there. So they would either need to wait or go around if it were safe to do so. And so now we're going to move down to the next segment, down near Morris Lane. So there's both bikeway and pedestrian improvements proposed here. And so here we are, we're at Morris Lane looking Diamond Head. You can see downtown in the distance. There's a pawn shop on the right, just to orient everyone. There's 4 lanes of traffic and parking on both sides of the street with a crosswalk. And so here we are proposing to preserve this crosswalk and enhance it with full pedestrian refuge island. So with concrete, you can see there in the transformation that just happened. And adding rectangular rapid flash beacons. So these are enhanced beacons that are more substantial than the ones that are there right now. You can also see the protected bike lanes on both sides of the street here. And to incorporate this design and maintain the 4 lanes of traffic for buses and vehicles, this would require the removal of on-street parking along the stretch. And so on the topic of parking, the team collected data during the week and weekend during multiple times of the day on occupancy and turnover. So occupancy means how much parking was occupied on a block by block basis. We usually look at it as a percent. And then turnover. And turnover is how long people are staying in those parking spots. We found that of the 166 parking spaces on North King Street, there was actually a good amount of parking available during the weekdays during most typical business hours. We did find that vehicles tended to occupy spaces more in the evening. So the occupancy rises in the evening and is also high very, very early in the morning. And so this, we can draw the conclusion that spaces are being used by residents and the parking vehicles overnight there along a lot of the stretches. The parking goes through different various configurations between metered and unmetered and unregulated and time limited parking. We did find through our data collection that over half of the parkers in the time limited stalls were staying over the time limits. So basically we found that far less people that are able to use the spaces than what they're actually designed for. So this would be people staying in 1 hour parking spaces for 3, 4, 5 hours or even more, where that space should be able to be used by a new vehicle every hour throughout the business hours of the day. And so this is a map of the entire corridor's parking supply and what parking stalls are proposed to be retained and removed. So blue represents the retained parking on the map, and you can see that numerically in the graphic just below along each segment. And red represents the removed parking. There's business parking along a vast majority of places where parking removal is necessary. So these are represented by the yellowish colored parcels on the map. So these locations are business parcels that have parking through our audits that we've conducted off street. So those businesses have their own parking and they don't rely on on-street parking primarily. So along business parcels that have no dedicated off-street parking, can you go to the next slide? The team maintained the parking where possible. So what you saw just got circled. These are the blue lines next to the red squares. So where we conducted our audit and determined that parking was not available to those businesses, we made some adjustments to our design to preserve the parking in those locations. And so, as noted in the last slide, businesses are a very important part of considering parking in this design. If you want to go to the next slide. And so these proposed plans focus on preserving parking in areas where businesses have limited off-street parking, such as this example that we already just looked at, fronting Island Style Barbecue. So there was, at one point during our design progression, our design was removing all 8 on-street spaces on this block. We were able to make some design changes by reducing the bikeway protection. So you see a standard bike lane on the left side there. By doing that and reducing the bikeway protection, we were able to retain 5 additional stalls plus a loading zone in this area. So we have made some design changes to preserve parking for business access. I think now we're going to go to a poll.
Great, so we have arrived at our first real poll. I'm going to launch it now. Based on the information that was presented to you, what are your thoughts on the proposed North King Street improvements? A, love it. B, like it. C, like it with some modifications. D, not sure. E, don't like it. I'll give a few minutes for everyone to respond. Again, if you have specific comments that you would like to provide at this time, go ahead and enter those comments into the chat box, the chat feature. Also, please note that the staff and consultants are unable to conduct the poll. So the results that you see are based on everyone else's feedback, the participants' feedback. It looks like everyone has completed the poll. And you should be seeing the results now. It looks like 44% likes it. And there's equal, not sure, and love it. It's great. Thank you for that. We can move on. Great. Polling question number 3, is that right?
Yeah, I think we need to go back.
Okay. So then the next question, which elements of the proposed designs along North King Street do you think are most important? A, pedestrian refuge islands. B, rectangular rapid flash beacons. C, protected bike lanes. D, curb extensions on side streets. E, none, no improvements. F, not sure. We'll wait just a few more moments for everyone else to respond. Okay, and our results are C, protected bike lanes have the most with 61%, followed by equal percent pedestrian refuge islands and rectangular flash beacons. Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to move forward. And we're going to take a trip over to Waikimela Road and Huftaling Street. And so our study corridor is between Dillingham and King, and we'll look at a map on the next slide. This corridor is, we found, is designed for a lot of different modes as well. Freight, cars, people walking, people biking, and parking. So here's a map of the proposed improvements, just like we looked at for North King. And it has various options from our Complete Streets toolbox. And so our limits of our corridor, I'm sorry, I actually misspoke earlier. Our limits of our corridor are from Nimitz to School Street. And so Waikimela and Huftaling is a high pedestrian injury corridor that Daniel was mentioning earlier between Hart and North School. So on this corridor, we took careful consideration to look at locations with an eye for targeting pedestrian improvements. There's already a bike lane on this corridor, so we're also looking at just ways to improve that with the space available. Makai of Dillingham, there's an existing buffered bike lane, and so this portion we would propose to make a protected bike lane with flexible posts. And so this can provide access to parks, Farrington High, and build out a connected network with the North King Street facility that we just went over. You can also see several spot improvements, which are the icons on the map here, that would improve the walking environment, curb extensions and refuge islands that we'll go over in a bit. There's also an opportunity to plant street trees between Dillingham and North King Street in the existing sidewalk. And so this would make the walking environment better and provide shade and really just kind of cool the area. This corridor doesn't vary as much, so we're going to actually walk through it with looking at cross sections, which we're going to go through in a moment here. And so first section we're going to look at is on the next slide. This is the section between McNeil and Alokele Muanui. So we can just go ahead into the next one. So this is the existing configuration. So we're looking Malka around McNeil Street. So you can see Meg's Drive-In on the right and the multifamily residential, the housing development on the left side of the street there. There's 4 lanes and parking on both sides, and there's a pretty narrow standard bike lane. 4 feet is very narrow by standards. And so this was something that we wanted to look at improving. And so if we transition on the street here. So here we propose removing parking on the Diamond Head side of the street to enhance this bikeway and make it protected. So you can see the bikeway got wider and a buffer was added with the flexible bollards. The parking would remain on the Eva side of the street next to the housing development. So this would create a protected facility on both sides. We'd still maintain the same number of lanes, and this facility would cater to riders of all ages and abilities. And so this is a common improvement that we were making on this stretch of the roadway. We also wanted to look at an alternative configuration between Kamuali'i, which is just Makai Meg's Drive-In, and Alokele near the Texaco station. And so this we're calling it our road diet alternative. And so we looked at reducing the number of lanes from 4 to 3 as a way to make the existing bike lane protected. And so this would be a trade-off as opposed to removing the parking that I just showed you. So there are some advantages for this alternative design. And pay attention here because we're making a poll on this. So there's less number of travel lanes for pedestrians to cross, and that's an advantage that we determined I think was worth at least exploring this option. And there's slower vehicle speeds too. Road diets have been proven to slow down vehicles because people driving, the most prudent driver is going to be the one setting the pace speed. And it also would provide a dedicated turn lane for left turns into driveways. Right now, if you're turning left along this segment, you'd have to wait in the left through lane, and that causes some conflicts. And we'd also be able to maintain additional 10 parking spaces. There are a couple disadvantages though, and this would have to be also taken into consideration. And so one of those is that the design would require some pedestrian crossing islands. So those purple icons on the map there would need to be removed because we'd need to leave room for the center left turn lane. And then also just that this is a pretty short section. It's only a 1/4 mile long where we would have less lanes. And so drivers would be merging from the 4-lane section to the 3-lane section and then back to the 4-lane section again. And so I think we have a cross section on the next slide here. And so this is the same view that we just looked at. So if you remember before, the roadway had 4 lanes with no parking along the fronting the Meg's Drive-In side. So this is the road diet alternative. The road diet alternative you see have 3 lanes. The middle lane where the red car is a center left turn lane. And then parking is preserved on both sides of the street. The bike lane here would also be parking buffered. So similar to what we showed on North King Street, the bike lane would be on the curb and be protected with the parking. So you park a little bit away from the curb, and people riding would have that protection with parked vehicles as well as the buffer. And then we just wanted to reiterate this. We already looked at this picture of Kamehameha Road. This would be similar in design to this treatment, except that the bike lane would actually be curbside, so flipped with the parking. And so that's just to refresh people's memory. And then I think we're going to open up another poll here.
Yes.
This was the quiz I was talking about.
All right, question number 4. Which alternative do you prefer for Waikmilo Road between Michael, if you could help me out with those 3 pronunciations.
Kalihi and
Great.
Olakay Street. So this is between Meg's Drive-In and the Texaco station, basically around there.
Great, thank you. So A, the 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction with no left turn lane, protected bike lanes, and parking on the other side of the street. B, road diet, 1 lane in each direction and left turn lanes. C, neither, prefer no change. D, I'm not sure. A few more moments for people to put in their answers. We started to slow down, but I think there may be a few more people who may want to answer. Okay. So it looks like we have a clear winner with 68% preferring B, the road diet option. The next is neither, I prefer no change at 15%. Okay, I think we can move on.
All right, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Moving on, so now we're going Mauka of North King, which is another one of our study corridors. So we're on the other side of North King, where the roadway actually changes names from Waikimilo to Huff-Tailing Street. And so we're gonna go near Farrington High here again. So Farrington High is gonna be on our left side. Let's go to the next slide. So we're looking Mauka, the car dealership's on the right, and you can see Farrington High, I believe it's the athletic fields there on the left with the wall. So here there's 4 lanes of traffic on the street with parking along Farrington High. This parking does go away during peak hours, but we're showing it here as parking. And so here, if we transition it to the next one, we would propose to redistribute the space of a existing buffer that is just along the side of the roadway. And we're able to move that buffer to the bikeway that exists. And I'm sorry, but we're able to redistribute space from the existing buffer to protect the bike lane. And so the tollway spaces we'd also propose to be removed, but the 24-hour parking sections would remain. So we're still showing parking here. A little bit further down where there's peak hour towing, we would be removing that. So again, we were able to fit the same sort of facility we are able to fit in Makai. And so that's all about creating good facilities that are continuously protected so that it gets people that are a little bit more uncomfortable riding. And so lastly, we're going to move up past the H1 overpass. So we're near Peter Buck Park. And so we're between H1 ramps and Peter Buck Street. And so the Peter Buck Park is there on the left. Here there's 4 lanes, again, with parking on both sides of the street, and also that very narrow bike lane that exists throughout this corridor. And so here we wanted to maintain parking in this area. And through our data collection, we did determine that traffic was a little bit lower in this stretch. So you're past the freeway ramp traffic from H1. And so in this section, we would propose to, if we transition. Oh, there we go. We would propose reducing the number of Makai lanes from 2 to 1. And so we'd leave 2 Mauka lanes. There would be 1 Makai lane that would actually open back up to a second lane, which you don't see in this image, at the ramp. So at the Halona Street ramp, there would be 2 Makai lanes. This way we're able to preserve parking and protect the bikeway and also make it much more substantial. So you're going from 4 feet to 6 feet and adding that 3-foot buffer and making it parking protected. And so this is just with the removal of 1 Makai lane for these, I think it's 1 or 2 blocks. And this facility would continue all the way up to School Street And we're able to create a floating bike lane, which we don't have a cross section for, up to school. So we'd get the bikeway all the way up to school. And I think we'll go to some polls for Kamehameha Huffton.
Great. So question number 5, which elements of the proposed designs along Waikamilo Road, Hoftailing Street, do you think are most important? For this option, you can choose more than one answer. So for A, it's pedestrian refuge islands, B, curb extensions, C, new sidewalk, trees and landscaping, D, protected bike lanes, E, none, no improvements, F, I'm not sure. Just a few more moments for everyone to respond. Okay, it looks like everyone has entered a response. And so we see, looks like the preference is for C, new sidewalk, trees, landscaping at 61%, and then 58% for protected bike lanes and pedestrian refuge islands. We have the next poll, question number 6. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, do you feel that the plans shown will create a safer environment for people walking and biking to jobs, schools, homes, the bus, and the future rail station near HCC? So your options are yes, no, somewhat, or not sure, don't know. Okay. Looks like most people have responded. We'll give it a couple more seconds in case anyone else wants to put in a last minute answer. Okay. And it looks like 74% say yes, with 23% saying somewhat, and 3% saying not sure or don't know. Okay, I think we can move on to Middle Street and School Street.
All right, let's move on. We're on our last corridor. And so middle and school, we found through our design review and data collection, this street emphasizes transit and vehicular traffic during peak times of day and supports parking off peak. So we have a 4-lane roadway. As you see here, a lot of people crossing the street too, as you can see in this photo. And so we'll go to the next slide and look at a map from our kickoff meeting. And so this map shows our study extents. And so we're starting at Middle Street and North King Street. And then we're going around the big curve where the street changes name to School Street, North School Street, all the way down to Queen Anne Street. Transit is a driving decision point on this corridor. And so we did explore lane reductions, but we ended up not opting for that because of the frequent transit along the street. And there's also a lot of schools, so hence the name of the street. So we want to be thinking about children crossing and also elderly too, from our data collection and review of street crossings. So if we go to the next slide, there is limited space along the roadway for lane conversions. So these streets look a little bit different than North King and Kamehameha Huftailing. And so we're going to be looking at a lot of spot improvements at intersections. North School Street was identified as a high pedestrian injury corridor, the ones that Daniel was mentioning earlier. 6 intersections on this corridor are high pedestrian injury intersections. So instead of adding segment level improvements like a bikeway or wider sidewalks for the entire stretch, we're actually looking at safety improvements at the intersection level. So at those intersections where we have data that we know that pedestrian collisions are happening. So we're looking at a zoomed in view of just part of the corridor. And these are the icons showing all the safety improvements proposed as part of this project. We don't have time to go through every single one right now, but please join us in the breakout room if you want to go over detailed plan views, and we can zoom in and you can see the illustrations. But we're going to go over some improvements at select locations. So we're starting around Fern Elementary right now. And so here you are looking Makai. Fern Elementary is on the right side of the street. So this is a 4-lane roadway during the peak hour. And there's no bike facilities on the street. There's parking allowed in the outer lanes off peak. We did determine that this corridor the parking wasn't utilized like as much as it is on other parts of the corridor where there's off-peak parking. And so what we're proposing on this stretch is to reduce, there we go. To remove parking lane along the corridor. So this allows for 2 lanes at the H1 intersection and the Kamehameha intersection near Fern Elementary. And so we do kind of a flip-flop thing where there's 2 Makai lanes near Kamehameha, and then there's going to be 2 Makai lanes at the H1 intersection where the ramps are. And so you're looking at a section that's more Makai, where there's 2 lanes Makai bound. And so this allows extra space to install a standard bike lane. We're very constrained with right-of-way here. So we're only able to install actually a standard bike lane even with this lane reduction. There's no protection on this stretch. So this is a short bikeway, and it's going to connect an already in progress Safe Routes to School project on Kalihi Street. There's a path being built alongside the elementary school there. So this bike lane would connect to that path. And so now we're transitioning around the corner to School Street. So we're looking at the Kamehameha Road intersection. We've shown some photos of that already with the road diet as an example. So this intersection has 2 gas stations just south of School Street, and this is where also the Jack in the Box is on the right of the image that you see right here. And so we have a lot of improvements proposed here. This is a high pedestrian injury location, and so we wanted to look at how to address pedestrian crossing safety. And so first is the Kamehameha Forest Makai bound slip lane. So that's the teal icon that you can see on the left side of the plan view. This would be improved by raising the pedestrian crossing. And Drew mentioned this in our toolbox. So you can see that on the right side of the slide here as an example of this project, how this can be done just by tabling the intersection. So this forces vehicles to slow down, and it puts the pedestrian at more raised stance so that they're more visible to people driving. We'd also propose filling in the yellow painted island that exists there right now and create a pedestrian refuge. And so that's the purple icon shown. This would also slow turning vehicles from School Street that are turning left or right, going Makai bound onto Cam 4. And so then the right side of the, go back one more. And then on the right side of the street here, the red X is the slip lane would be proposed to be removed. So this is different than the teal icon. So the teal icon, we're keeping the channelized lane and just raising it. Where the red X is, this lane would be actually removed. So you would still be able to make a right turn here. You would just have to go around the island. And there may be some modifications needed to the island itself. And this treatment would definitely have to go through some more detailed drainage design and also confirm that the concept works with the nearby fire station's operations. We know that there's a fire station nearby, so we'll have to do a little bit more engagement. But this is a very wide crossing, and it makes the crossing very long. So we targeted this one for full removal. Okay. And so now we're moving down to Gulick Street. So Tasty Chop Suey restaurant is on the right side of the image here, and we can go straight into the rendering. Trying to make sure we finish in time for the breakout rooms. So this intersection has wide corners. You can see them in the image that expand the intersection and make the pedestrian crossings pretty long. And so if we transition to the proposed, we can fill in these spaces with curb extensions and shorten the crossing distance. And we also ensure that vehicles are turning at a safer and slower speed. We'd also propose filling in some of the excess space that's in the middle of the roadway. You can see there with the median island. So this is at a signal, so it wouldn't necessarily be a pedestrian refuge, but it does slow vehicles turning onto School Street and also off of School Street. This is a high pedestrian injury location. So, you know, this is another location where we're just targeting those pedestrian improvements to make the crossing safer. And then wanted to just talk a little bit about preserving the crosswalks along this corridor. So talking about all of our different tools, paint, just striping the crosswalk with paint along 4-lane roadways like this is just not enough. And so we're proposing to retain crosswalks with several different methods. And so these are 4 locations that are near one another. There's also Ahunui further Eva, which is not on this map, but it's another location where we'll be preserving the crosswalk. And so we conducted counts to determine where the best locations were to preserve and prioritize for preservation and enhancement. And so next slide. And some ways we can preserve the crosswalk are with those rectangular rapid flash beacons that we've been talking about. And then also, also on School Street, we can't actually add refuge islands. So you see on the left side of the image, left image here, because of the street width limits, but we can add the rapid flash beacons. Another method, as you can see on the right side of the screen, is raising the crosswalk. And so this creates a vertical deflection. So sort of like what we just talked about, the slip lane being converted to a raised crossing, this would just be raising the crossing along the roadway. And so there's some treatments like this along Kalihi. That's a much bigger road than School Street. So I think it would function a little bit differently. Speeds are a bit slower, obviously, on School Street, but we want to get them you know, even slower, and we want to make people more aware of this crossing. So this is an example on the mainland where the raised crossing is installed. So it looks like a speed hump. It's actually flat on the top, and it allows people to cross just as if they're crossing the crosswalk, but there's vertical deflection for people driving. And so the final treatment of what will go on at each of these crosswalks will be determined later in the design phases. These treatments can be alternated, so you could do a rapid flash beacon, a raised crossing, and then switch back to the next crossing via rapid flash beacon. And so this avoids repetitiveness, and it makes drivers more aware, you know, so they don't keep seeing the same thing and become complacent. And so we wanted to show an example of this in action. And so this is at Aupuni. This is a high pedestrian injury location. So we're looking at School Street near Aupuni. Helena's Hawaiian Food is located near here. That's on the left. So you can see the standard crosswalk that's there, and then this would be the proposed design. So the enhanced crosswalk treatment with strining and striping for vehicles. So the advanced stop bar, the sign to say for vehicles to stop. I'm sorry, I just got an error on my laptop, but it wasn't this. So, and the rapid flash beacon. So this would be pushed by the pedestrians, and the beacon would help notify drivers that there's somebody crossing. These are really effective at night, especially. And so I think lastly here, we're going to take a look at North School Street, where it runs up against H1. So we're up where the street is just above H1 between Liliha and Nu'uanu. And this is the one-way road portion of School Street. So it's not the 4-lane section here. It's where it's varies between 2 and 3 lanes one way. And so near the Diamond Head end of North School Street, we identified as an important bike connection between Nu'uanu, where the bikeway exists between downtown and School Street, and connecting to Liliha Street, where bike lane is planned going Malka from School Street. And so getting that connection in, which is the yellow line you see, is important, and it allows connected network that can connect the Liliha area and into downtown. So a pretty good gap here that we were going to try to look at filling. So we'll go to the next slide. So here we are looking Diamond Head. Shimazu's Shave Ice is on the left side of the image. And you can see that this is the one-way section of School Street that exists. And so here we would transition and propose to connect the two bike facilities with a two-way bike lane. So this is a little bit different than what we've been showing with the one-way bike lanes on both sides of the street. This would be a two-lane bikeway on the Malka side of the street between Laliha and New Lanu. And all this is done by utilizing the space from the travel lane mid-block, the right turn pocket at Laliha, and some parking near the food land. And so we looked at each one of those impacts individually. The parking near the food land, we don't believe is utilized because they have off-street parking. The right turn pocket wouldn't be impact traffic that much at Laliha. And we're actually able to preserve all of the on-street parking next to Shimazu, which is what you see here in this example. So the parking is still intact near Shimazu next to the bike lane. And we're still collecting some additional data here, especially around the H1 ramps to make sure that this just works operationally. But this is what we have planned for now. We're still going some analysis though at this location. And we'd love to hear your feedback in this area.
Great, so we have arrived at our last poll. The question is, which elements of the proposed designs along Middle Street and School Street do you feel are most important? Again, you may choose more than one answer in this poll. Your options are A, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, B, raised crosswalks, C, curb extensions, D, closed slip lanes, E, Middle Street bike connection, F, School Street bike connection, G, none, no improvements, H, I'm not sure. I'll give everyone a few moments to answer. If you are not seeing all of the options on your screen, you can scroll down and you should be able to see the rest of the options on the polling question. Looks like most people have responded. I'll give it a few more seconds. Okay. So it looks like the rectangular rapid flashing beacons have 70% of the vote, followed by F, School Street bike connection at 67%. So you can see all of the responses if you scroll down throughout the polling question. And we have arrived actually at the breakout rooms. So everyone has the choice between 4 rooms, each representing a portion of the Kalihi corridor. We could go to the next slide. The breakout session will last approximately 20 minutes, and you'll have the chance to chat with DTS staff and design professionals at Nelson Nygaard. So if you have particular comments, questions, concerns about one of the 4 corridors that we discussed earlier in the presentation, now is your opportunity to provide those detailed comments. So in terms of protocols for the breakout rooms, if you could go to the next slide. If you are interested in having a chat and verbally communicating your question or comment, please use the raise hand feature that we discussed earlier in the presentation, and the facilitator will call on you. If you are interested in providing a written comment, you can do so in the chat feature at the bottom right of your screen. To preserve the sound quality, please keep yourself muted unless you have been called upon to speak. And we recognize that the time is going to be very limited, so please be kind to others, provide your comments, and then make sure everybody has a chance to be heard. So if we could go to the next slide. Once you're in the room, again, you can either chat directly into the chat function or raise your hand and say your comments verbally. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to open up all of the rooms now. At the bottom of your screen, you should see an icon that says Breakout Rooms. You can click on that icon and then select which breakout room you would like to enter. You just select the room and then hit enter on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, comments, if you're unable to enter into one of the breakout rooms, please raise your hand and I can help direct you. I can help direct you to where you need to go.
Okay, well, I guess everybody's back. So we want to just wrap up with a few next steps. I think we're all really pleased with the outcomes of tonight's meeting. Seems that we're certainly on the right track and that we've been listening to the community and to everybody who's participated for the last few years in this process. So let's talk a little bit about implementation. Okay, so immediate next steps. We hope by tomorrow we will at least have the presentation from this evening and the different plans for the various corridors up on our project website. And I can paste the web address there in the chat. And then we will work on getting a recording of the meeting as well as the results of the polling up on the website as well. And we've got about I think we're requesting public comments for the next month or so. So by the end of November, we really hope that people can sort of dig into the details and send us your comments, share it with your neighbor, and really get the word out about what is being proposed. Because we are getting very close to finalizing these plans and actually moving them into project designs. So a couple of the projects that we're thinking about advancing, typically complete streets improvements are done in conjunction with repaving of roadways. As some of you may know, North King Street was repaved a few years ago. That's when we put in some of the crossing islands and changed some of the crosswalks. And we won't be paving King Street for quite a while. So we are looking to do a standalone bikeway project along North King Street. And so I think given some of the direction tonight, and we'll wait for the comments to come in over the next month or so, we can actually start moving ahead with the paperwork to do the design contract. And then we would be looking for funding to actually build the facility in the next several years. The other corridors under the project, Middle Street, School Street, Hopton and Waikimilo, are actually in need of paving, and those streets will be paved in the next several years. And so we have a wonderful opportunity to sort of combine those efforts and do all the necessary upgrades at the same time. So again, we'll be moving into the design phase of the proposals in relatively short order on those corridors as well. So pretty exciting that we have ways to implement these improvements. We're not just sort of talking about conceptual ideas. Okay, and then the last slide just shows again our Facebook handle and our website. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, I believe, if anybody wants to follow us that way. But again, just thank everybody for sharing their time with us this evening. I know we went a little bit over, so thank you for staying. I don't know. I don't know if there's any concluding remarks. Maybe see if one of my directors wants to provide any thoughts, but I'm really happy with the feedback that we've gotten, and I just thank our whole team for really pulling together some great proposals for this neighborhood that is ready for some change.
I'll take you up on that then, Renee.
Thanks, Roger.
I spent, I'm back to the Honolulu Municipal Building, but for the last 30 something years, I've spent half my life in Kalihi on Middle Street at the bus facility. And so, I've got to love Ray's Cafe and other area businesses. And I think that with proper nurturing, I think what we all want is we want that North King Street Business District to thrive. And that's, I think through some of these projects, that will help facilitate part of that. And that's truly my hope, is that, Kalihi is a great community that has been neglected too often. And we see that when we have these kind of meetings, that people are so engaged and want to have improvements. And for that, it makes us in the city really feel great about going to Kalihi, because we know we're going to be greeted with open arms. And so I hope that we can move on these projects and get going. And I hope we can continue to engage with the community as we get closer and closer to putting paint on the ground or breaking or repaving or the other projects that we're going to do.
Awesome.
And back to you, Renee.
Okay, with that, everyone have a good night. I don't have to tell anyone to drive home safely because you are all at home already. So go enjoy your loved ones, get some rest, and we will be in touch. Mahalo.
Thank you, everyone.